Grace Whitfield had known Melissa Cole for 6 years. Long enough to trust the sound of her laugh. The backyard smelled like charcoal and cut grass. Melissa moved between guests with a pitcher of lemonade, touching shoulders, refilling glasses, saying everyone's name like it mattered to her. 4-year-old Lily chased Bubbles across the lawn in bare feet. "Where's Emma this summer?" someone asked. "Boulder," Melissa said, smiling. "With my sister. She needed a change of scenery." Grace smiled too. Nodded. Took a sip of lemonade. It wasn't the answer. It was how fast it came. Later, walking past the garage, Grace noticed Emma's bike leaning against the wall. Pink handlebars. A layer of dust thick enough to write in. 9-year-olds who go to Boulder for the summer usually take their bikes. That night, Grace opened her phone and typed a message to a 9-year-old girl she barely knew. "Hey Emma, it's Grace from next door. Just wanted to say hi. Hope Boulder's fun." She stared at the screen for a long time. No reply came. Not that night. Not the next morning. Grace told herself kids don't check their phones. She told herself a lot of things that summer. Daniel Cole worked late most nights now. It was easier that way. Melissa handled everything at home so well he sometimes felt unnecessary. He told himself that was a good thing. A functioning family. A wife who had it together. The video calls with Emma had gotten shorter. Audio only, most weeks. "Bad signal at Katie's place," Melissa said, setting his phone face down on the counter before he could ask for one more minute. "Can I just text her instead?" he asked one night. "She lost her charger again," Melissa said, already turning toward the sink. "You know how she is." He didn't argue. He rarely did anymore. Arguing with Melissa felt like pushing against something that always found a softer way to win. His mother, Carol, called about Emma's birthday. Wanted to send a package. "She's swamped with camp," Melissa said, standing in the doorway of Daniel's office, arms crossed loosely, voice light. "I'll pass it along. Camp doesn't usually run through a birthday," Carol said on speakerphone, and for a second the kitchen went quiet. "Kids' schedules are different these days, Carol," Melissa said, smiling toward Daniel like she wanted him to smile back. He did. He noticed things and set them down before they became questions. The basement door, padlocked now. "Storage overflow," Melissa said the day she had it installed. He remembered thinking it was strange to padlock a basement in your own house. He remembered not saying so. Lily started asking about her sister at dinner. "When's Emma coming back?" "Soon, sweetheart," Melissa said, cutting Lily's chicken into smaller pieces without looking up. "She's having so much fun." Lily accepted it the way 4-year-olds accept most things adults tell them. Daniel envied that. He wished believing came that easily to him too. One night he found himself standing outside the basement door for almost a full minute, keys in his pocket he didn't remember bringing down with him. He told himself he was looking for the toolbox. He went back upstairs without trying the lock. "We're a family," Melissa said later, resting her head on his shoulder in bed. "That's all that matters. You, me, Lily, Emma. All of us." He believed her. He wanted to. Wanting to believe something and actually believing it had started to feel like the same thing, if he didn't look too closely at the difference. Somewhere in the house, a phone that used to belong to a 9-year-old sat dark in a drawer, its last location pinged 3 months old. Grace's unanswered text sat in Emma's inbox beside it, still unread. Detective Sarah Nguyen didn't expect much from the anonymous tip. Wellness checks rarely turned into anything. Most of the time, they ended with an embarrassed parent and an apology at the door. But the school records didn't add up. Emma Cole had been withdrawn from Lakewood Elementary in April. "Family relocating to homeschool," the form said. Signed by Melissa Cole. Not Daniel. Nguyen called the number listed for the homeschool co-op. It rang 8 times. No voicemail. She drove out anyway. Melissa answered the door in workout clothes, hair pulled back, holding a mug of tea like she'd been expecting a neighbor, not an officer. Her face arranged itself into concern almost instantly, quick, practiced, appropriate. "Is everything okay?" she asked first, before Nguyen had said a word. Inside, the kitchen smelled like fresh coffee. Lily colored quietly at the table, humming to herself. "Emma's at a summer program," Melissa said, calm, warm, helpful. "Just outside Boulder. I can get you the contact information. Hold on, let me find it." She never did. Not that visit. Not the full up call 3 days later, when she apologized and said she'd misplaced the folder and would call back by the weekend. She didn't call back by the weekend either. Nguyen's eyes drifted, once, to the padlocked basement door at the end of the hall. "Storage," Melissa said before Nguyen had even asked. "Danny's tools mostly. It's a mess down there, I'd be embarrassed." Nguyen wrote it down anyway. Not because it meant anything yet. Because it was the kind of detail that answers a question nobody has asked out loud. She talked to a neighbor on the way out, an older man raking leaves, who mentioned, almost in passing, that he hadn't seen the older girl since around Easter. "Figured she was just busy with school stuff," he said. "Nice family, though. Melissa's always been so involved. Bakes for the whole block." Gwen thanked him and got back in her car. Involved was one word for it, she thought. She wasn't sure yet what the right one was. That night she pulled Emma's last cell tower ping and stared at it for a long time before closing her laptop. The signal hadn't moved from the house in 3 months. The phone records came back first. Emma's phone hadn't left the house in 3 months. Not once. No pings from Boulder, no pings from anywhere but the house on Larkspur Court. Gwen sat with that fact for a long time before she brought it to her captain. "Could be the phone's just sitting somewhere," he said. "Kids lose chargers. Kids leave phones behind." "For 3 months?" He didn't have an answer for that. Neither did she, not yet, but the absence of one was starting to feel like its own kind of evidence. She pulled the withdrawal paperwork again and noticed something she'd missed the first time. The homeschool co-op listed on the form didn't exist. Not under that name, not under any name registered in Jefferson County. She'd called a number that rang to nowhere because there was nowhere for it to ring to. Then the school counselor, Anita Patel, remembered something from March, a session she'd almost forgotten to log. Emma, quiet, picking at the frayed sleeve of her sweatshirt, answering questions in single words. "I don't want to go home." At the time, Patel had written it off as a bad week. A 9-year-old adjusting to a stepmother, a new baby sister taking up all the attention. Kids said things like that. She'd made a note, scheduled a follow-up for the next week. The follow-up never happened. Emma didn't come back to school after spring break. Patel hadn't flagged it. Nobody had. There'd been a form, a signature, a reasonable explanation. The system had done exactly what it was built to do, and it still hadn't been enough. "I should have called someone," Patel told Gwen, her voice cracking slightly. "I told myself it wasn't my place." Gwen didn't correct her. She was starting to understand how many people had told themselves the same thing. Neighbors remembered bruises Melissa explained as clumsiness, a fall on the stairs, a bike accident, a mark on Emma's arm in February that Melissa had covered with a long-sleeved shirt for a week straight, joking about how clumsy her stepdaughter was. Nobody remembered seeing Emma after early spring. A few people remembered noticing, and not asking. One woman said she'd seen Emma crying by the mailbox in March and had assumed it was normal kid stuff, a fight with a friend, a bad day. Gwen requested financial records next. A modest life insurance policy on Emma, opened in February, listing Melissa as primary beneficiary. Not large. Not nothing. Filed quietly, the kind of policy that raises no alarms on its own, until it sits next to everything else. She laid it all out on the table in the precinct, the padlocked door, the phone that never moved, the counseling note nobody followed up on. The insurance policy nobody would have noticed without a reason to look. None of it proved anything yet. But every answer was opening a door to a worse question, and Gwen had stopped believing this was a runaway case 3 pieces of paper ago. Melissa broke down in the interview room, hands shaking around a paper cup of water. "She ran away," she said. "After a fight. I panicked. I didn't want CPS involved. I didn't want people thinking I was a bad mother." She cried. She apologized. She begged them to find her stepdaughter. An Amber Alert went out that afternoon. By evening, Melissa's face was on the local news, the devoted stepmother, searching desperately for the girl she'd raised as her own. Strangers left flowers on the porch. Daniel held her that night, believing, finally, that the worst was already over. He didn't know the worst hadn't happened yet. It had happened months ago. Grace remembered it almost by accident. Melissa, in April, hiring a landscaper. A butterfly garden, she'd said, for Lily. Fresh soil turned along the back fence line. She mentioned it to Gwen almost as an afterthought. The dog alerted within minutes. What investigators found beneath the garden rewrote the entire case. Emma had died in early spring, a fall down the basement stairs, during a punishment that had gone further than anyone but Melissa would ever know the truth of. Not planned. Not premeditated, the way people would later argue in court. But hidden. Buried. Covered with flowers for a 4-year-old's birthday, while the real birthday girl was never coming home. "I don't want to go home," Emma had said back in March. By April, she never did again. Daniel watched the interrogation footage from behind the glass, Gwen standing beside him, not saying anything at all. On the screen, Melissa's composure finally broke, not into grief, but into something colder. Justifications. "I was protecting this family. I was protecting Lily. I was protecting us. We're a family," she told him. That's all that matters. He understood, now, which family she meant. Melissa Cole was charged with concealing a death and child abuse resulting in death. The insurance claim was never filed. Investigators believed it never would have been. Daniel filed for full custody of Lily. Carol moved in to help. Grace stopped hosting backyard dinners. She couldn't stand in that yard anymore. Gwen closed the file. But not the question that came with it: how many people had looked at Melissa Cole and simply believed what she wanted them to see. The bike still leans in the garage. Nobody has moved it. Grace walks past it some mornings and thinks about a text message that was never answered, and the summer she spent explaining away a silence that was never really a mystery at all. The danger was never hidden as well as everyone told themselves it was. It just needed people willing to keep believing the story.